Okay, well, good morning to you all. Thank you so much for your patience and thanks for joining us. I'm Erica Hartquist, Public Information Officer with Oregon Health Authority. Today, we are hosting this Zoom media briefing to discuss findings from a new report and addressing climate change disasters that affect youth mental health. And joining us today are Julie Early Cifuentes, Oregon Health Authority Climate and Health Program lead and the lead author of OHA's Climate Change and Youth Mental Health Report, which you're going to hear a lot about today. Dr. Meg Carey, child and adolescent psychiatrist and a senior health advisor with Oregon Health Authority. And our youth guests today, which we're very excited and lucky to have join us, Mecca Donovan, Mira Saturine, and Tamaya Wiki. A friendly reminder for our media colleagues to please mute your audio and use the raise your hand function if you'd like to be added to the queue and ask your question. So also just know that a YouTube link will be provided. This will give you a chance to have that after the news conference. And this is an opportunity for members of the media to ask your questions and hear from our experts. As you know, the public is always encouraged to ask questions during our several OHA Facebook Live events, but this is specifically for our media colleagues. Okay, now that I'm unmuted, we can get this started. Julie, go ahead.
Good morning, I'm Julie Early Cifuentes, and as Erica mentioned, I'm with the Oregon Health Authority Climate and Health Program, and I'm the lead author of OHA's Climate Change and Youth Mental Health Report. In March 2020, the governor directed the Oregon Health Authority to study the effects of climate change on youth mental health and depression. And OHA's Climate and Health Program welcomed the opportunity to study this important emerging public health issue. Our program first identified mental health as a health effect of climate change in our 2015 Climate and Health Profile Report. Since then, there's been more and more research that's been published about the negative effects of climate change on mental and emotional health. Research is showing three main pathways that climate change can adversely affect our mental health. Increased extreme weather events and climate-related disasters, such as wildfires and extreme heat events. Chronic climate stressors, such as water and food insecurity that can be brought on by drought. And increased awareness of the negative effects of climate change that can lead to climate anxiety. People who are at higher risk of experiencing the effects of these climate-related disasters and stressors are naturally at higher risk of experiencing the negative mental health effects that are associated with them. These groups include tribes, Black communities, other communities of color, and rural and low-income communities. Youth are also at higher risk for experiencing the negative mental health effects of climate change. A recent study released in 2021 surveyed 10,000 youth across the globe and found that 59% reported feeling very or extremely worried about climate change, and 84% of these youth were at least moderately worried. For this study in Oregon, we wanted to hear specifically from youth in Oregon. We partnered with the University of Oregon Suicide Prevention Lab, which conducted 5 focus groups with youth from across the state and interviewed 8 experts in public health, education, and in mental health. And for this study, we established several principles that guided the study design and process. So first, we wanted to hear from youth who are at the highest risk of experiencing the negative mental and emotional health effects of climate change. And we also wanted to make sure that participating in this study didn't cause more distress among youth. So we designed the focus groups so that they would feel supportive and give youth the opportunity to share what brings them hope and resilience, in addition to what causes them distress. And finally, we wanted to engage and involve youth in the study process. So we invited youth to serve as advisors for the project. And these youth were compensated to provide feedback on the report and to host a webinar for other youth to hear preliminary findings and share feedback. So I would now like to pass the mic to Dr. Meg Carey, who will talk about the findings of the study.
Thank you, Julie, and hello all. My name is Meg Carey. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist and a senior health advisor at the Oregon Health Authority. What we heard from youth in Oregon is similar to what youth across the planet have said. They have fear and worry about the effects of climate change on their lives and the lives of their younger siblings. They feel the frustration of powerlessness, that there is a big threat that they can do little to change. They feel angry that people in power haven't been acting with urgency, have not been doing enough to protect their futures and the health of our planet. And lastly, they feel the heavy burden and injustices, that much will be left to them to try to turn things around and manage the impacts. We also heard how adults working in education, mental health, climate change, and social justice can support youth action, resilience, and hope. Youth recognize the interdependence between social justice and climate change. They advocate that the two be bridged. Youth emphasize the importance of community. We can support youth in creating spaces where they can share how they are engaging in climate action and how they are caring for their emotional well-being. We must share power with youth in decision-making on issues that affect them, both in the areas of climate change and mental health. We can invest in robust mental health services in schools and in communities that are accessible, relevant, and welcoming to all youth. What we learned is that whether you are working in education, mental health, social justice, or climate change, or you are a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a mentor, it is important to listen to youth when they express worry about climate change. The distress and anxiety that youth are experiencing is a justified and appropriate response for the change that is here and the uncertainty about what is to come. We hope this study will fuel the sharing of ideas and more action in Oregon. It makes one thing very clear. We cannot expect our youth to feel hopeful about their futures until and unless we collectively and relentlessly address climate change. They need and deserve our support and leadership. We'll pass now back to you, Julie, to introduce the youth who are here to share their remarks.
Great. Thank you, Meg. Yeah, I would like to pass the mic to Mecca Donovan, who will kick us off.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Mecca Donovan. I'm 23 years old, and I'm based in Eugene, Oregon. I'm an Oregon Youth Peer Support Specialist, and I'm soon to be a postgraduate student studying child and adolescent mental health. Happy to be here talking with y'all. So a little bit about my experience. Climate harms have directly affected myself and my peers in a number of ways. Although I was fortunate not to lose my home during the fires, my summer was cut short from outdoor activities, and this took a toll on my mental health. As an adventurous person, it was unfortunate not to be able to go on hikes and spend time by the river and do things in nature that helped me practice self-care. It was also hard not being able to take my dog out on long walks due to the ash polluted air quality. And my dog even developed some health issues during the time of the fires. The extreme heat has also taken a toll on my intentional and precious time outside. As a youth peer support specialist, I've also seen the effects of climate change that climate change has on my peers in Oregon. Some people have lost homes. Some people experience even higher levels of stress and anxiety due to isolation during COVID during that time as well. I had the honor to co-facilitate a focus group in conversation about the impact of climate change on mental health for Oregon youth. We talked about three things. We talked about how climate change affects mental health, how youth in marginalized communities are affected by climate change, and how these communities build resilience. What we gathered and related to is that when thinking about the size of the climate crisis, the lack of action from older generations, It brings up feelings of hopelessness, anxiety, frustration, as well as an overwhelming feeling of responsibility and heavy weight to carry. We also acknowledge that racial injustices that are intimately connected with climate change. In other words, climate change is intersectional. So some communities are more impacted or uniquely impacted by climate change than others. An example of that is like factories where marginalized communities live. We also acknowledge that systems have created climate change and oppressive systems that have marginalized Black, Indigenous, and people of color for centuries. So we are here today requesting a call to action. We want to see accountability and acknowledgement of what we're experiencing as youth. We want to see more youth mental health support in schools and in our communities. We want to see youth invited to the table in decision-making. Overall, we want to see more genuine discussion and actual action for change. This can look like government and policymakers getting rid of fossil fuels and quickly change to clean energy in cars and trucks, homes and buildings. This can look like electrifying everything. That can look like plug vehicles, homes, and buildings into renewable energy. And us youth have so many ideas, so we would love to be more involved in brainstorming and take leadership in advocacy. So thank you for having me, Julie.
Thank you so much, Mecca. We'll now hear from Mira Sadaran.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, my name is Mira Sadaran and I live in Ashland. I'm 16 years old and I'm a rising junior at Ashland High School. While many of you out there were raised to think climate change was far off problem, I am living in it. So are my friends, my community, and all of you, whether you've accepted it or not. Many people need to understand that we are in a crisis. At the end of the summer of 2020, the Alameda fire swept through several towns neighboring Ashland. It was a terrible and stressful couple of days as details about the fire trickled in. My dad works for the fire department, so when the fire started, he was there immediately, and he was out fighting the fire for over 36 hours, which was super scary for me as we heard news about the fire and knowing that he was there in the middle of it. The whole experience of the Alameda fire was a terrifying wake-up call for our community, and it added a layer of reality to the climate crisis. I've been involved in climate action since I was 13, but I've always cared about the planet and wanted to protect it. Growing up in Ashland, I've spent a lot of time outdoors, so the environment was always very important to me. When I began learning about the effects climate change would have on myself and my peers, I felt like I had to take action or else it would be my fault that the world wouldn't be able to support future generations. This is a feeling that I hope no young person feels. It is important that people our age talk about climate change and important that adults make the time and space for us to do it. But that's not all. Adults need to step up way more. I need to see you doing big things. I'm not even old enough to vote yet, but I'm doing all that I can to try and make change. I hope that through the action myself and others my age take, it inspires other young people in Oregon to stand up for climate change and to feel less helpless in the efforts that they are able to give. I want kids to feel supported by adults who have more authority than them, and that adults who are in power will listen to youth and help them carry the burden of climate change. I think that we have all heard about the need for immediate action and how we need to act now to stop climate change. So why isn't that action being taken? My ask today is that if you have the power to make change, don't wait. We must transition off of fossil fuels such as oil, coal, and natural gas and begin requiring new infrastructure to be built without fossil fuels. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Mira. We'll now hear from Tamaya Wiki.
Thank you, Julie. Hello, everybody. I'm Tamaya Wiki. I'm a 16-year-old from Ashland, Oregon, and I'm going into my senior year. For me, it's important to mention that I'm Indigenous. On my mother's side, I'm Yurok, which are the native people in the middle of the redwoods where the Klamath River meets the Pacific Ocean. And my father is Ngāti Porou and Te Opori, which are the native people of Aotearoa or New Zealand. Although those are significantly different cultures, being on different sides of the Pacific Ocean and in different hemispheres, they have the same core values that the health and well-being of the land is intrinsically linked to the health and well-being of the people. Because of that, we see ourselves as stewards of the land, and that's the way that I have grown up. Over the course of my lifetime, I feel very privileged to be in Southern Oregon and Northern California, next to the Redwoods, next to the Klamath River, the Smith River, the Pacific Ocean, but I've seen the environment around me change significantly just in my lifetime. In the beach just below my grandmother's house, I used to spend walking along the coastline. From the time I went into middle school till now, a significant portion of that beach has been swallowed by the ocean. You can no longer walk in it. In my lifetime, I've grown up knowing that in August, I don't want to be outside because it's smoky out and there's forest fires surrounding me. They're taking the homes of the people I love and they're consuming entire towns. In my mother's generation, when she was growing up, she would go to traditional ceremonies and have smoked salmon that was fished traditionally by our people on our river, which we have fished at since time immemorial. In my lifetime, eating that fish, seeing that smoked salmon in our ceremonies is scarce. This isn't just a stressful conversation when we talk about the climate crisis. This is a full spiritual, emotional, and physical embodiment of how I am stressed out by this and how this impacts me. So you can imagine when I hear adults say, oh, you are the future leader, or you're the leader of tomorrow, or, oh, we are leaving behind this planet for you. That's frustrating because I'm not a leader of tomorrow. I'm a leader of today. This isn't a will. The climate crisis isn't a will. I don't magically get the earth as soon as my grandmother's generation is gone. I'm getting it now. I've been getting it 5 years ago. From the moment I was born into this crisis. Even if we don't feel it or see it or experience it on the same level as people, we are living in a climate crisis. This is not just a phrase that we can define or talk about on Earth Day. This is our living experience right now. For adults, I understand that not all of us are policymakers. It is necessary for the leaders in our communities, for the leaders around the world to take action and to take bold, necessary decisions to implement policy that protects us from this crisis. But also, I believe in this call to action that a good starting point for the adults around me, the parents around me, the teachers around me, the educators around me, is to have intergenerational conversations about the climate crisis. Beginning to have spaces like these where we can talk to each other. I believe that we can understand that we experience similar fears and anxieties about this crisis. And together, learning from each other, I believe that we can heal and shift our mindset about how we think about climate change, which healing ourselves relates to healing the planet. I believe that talking about these, keeping ourselves accountable, and not being shy to have these conversations and look at the facts is the most necessary step forward for the people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamaya. I just want to take another, moment to thank Mecca, Mira, and Tamaya for sharing their stories today. I also want to thank for the youth that were a part of the focus groups, and also for our youth advisors, as well as our study partners at the University of Oregon and our partners at Row Climate, our climate and youth era. This study was designed to elevate the voices of youth to better understand how climate change is affecting their well-being and what they need to feel hopeful and build resilience. We hope that it generates conversations in families and schools and communities, and that it informs decisions and policymaking in organizations, agencies, and among our leaders. For those of you who are interested in looking at the full report and haven't seen it or would like more information about the study, Erica will drop a couple of links in the chat. And now we are ready for any questions.
Great, thank you, Julie. And just a reminder, if you have a question, please use your raise the hand function here. And our first question comes from Kelly Azar with K2. Go ahead, Kelly.
Guys, just two quick questions. For the teens, I think let's start, if that's okay with you guys. What biggest change would you like to see going forward? I know that's kind of a broad question, but with one of you mentioned, today is it's not next lifetime, it's not next year, it's today for you guys. What do you hope to see changed soon to help make that change, and that might even help you guys and other teens who might be feeling what you're feeling? Anyone who wants to take it, it would be great.
I can start us off. So it's been a super awesome opportunity to be able to collaborate with everyone here over the course of the last few months. And I would love to see more opportunities for youth voice to be brought to the table and heard. That can look like support groups. One of the biggest bittersweet takeaways from our focus group is that we're not alone in this, and there's so many people who just have all of these crowded thoughts around climate change and our mental health, and we're not able to talk about it with other people. So having the opportunity to be invited to more opportunities or talks around this, and being able to brainstorm and share our ideas, because we definitely have a lot on our minds. So yeah.
And then just a quick follow-up. Obviously, climate change is not the only concern when it comes to youth mental health. We've heard a lot of conversations about how it has become a crisis, statewide and really countrywide, especially given the pandemic and everything that, our whole world, but also teens have been dealing with. Can you tell us, what you want to see big picture, and kind of explain a little bit about what you guys have been up against with, kind of a triple whammy these last few years?
I can go ahead and take that. I think it's really important that you bring up that climate change is not the only thing impacting youth's mental health. And I think it's important to recognize that all of these issues are intersectional, right? I understand that the pandemic has been really hard for a lot of people. Being able to, for some people, having that isolation, not having that social time has been stressful. For other people, going back into, I think, a world where we're more in person has been stressful too. But I think the most important part is recognizing that all of these things are intersectional, right? And so the conversations that we're having about our health, we need a healthy land for ourselves to be healthy. If there's an imbalance in our environment, and I don't just mean the tree in my yard is dying, I mean, if there's an imbalance because my education is, being sacrificed, having virtual versus in person, missing school because, there's COVID exposures, having social media where I feel like when I go on Instagram, I'm blasted with all of these different social injustices that are happening in the world. That is affecting my spirit and my body and my motivation. So I think it's just important to recognize all of these things are connected, and we understand that and we feel that.
Okay, and last question, I swear I'll stop. Julie and Meg, one of you, if you don't mind taking this, where do you hope this report goes from here? What do you hope to see either from the state or other adults, whatever the future is? What do you hope to see from this report?
I can take that, at least to start off with. Yeah, I think we're really looking at this report as, a conversation starter. This is an emerging issue that I don't think has been discussed enough yet. And we really wanted to start the conversation with youth voices. And, in the report, we do, have outlined, lots of different sorts of things that can happen, in the education among educators in schools or within mental health, as well as, agencies in working around climate change. These things about, as we're hearing from youth, is looking for ways to share power and engage youth. And so that can mean everything from talking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions to, disaster recovery. Like how can we find ways to partner with youth? And just to highlight as well, to Maya mentioning intergenerational conversations and the space right now, which is intergenerational. I think that is super important. It's a way for whether you're a parent or you are a decision maker, that we find ways to be in conversation with youth, that we take leadership on behalf of youth, but we also look for opportunities for youth to take leadership, and that we co-lead, right? That we co-lead this. So I realize that it's sort of, I think there needs to be a lot of conversations in schools, communities, organizations, to really get to some really, I think, specific actions in all those different contexts. But I think that, I think this is hopefully the beginning of a lot of conversations and action.
Great, thank you all so much. Okay, our next question was typed into the chat. It's from Monica Samaya with OPP, asking, what was the time frame that it took to complete this report?
Okay, I'm gonna have to overcome the COVID time warp here, but so we began, the executive order was issued, I think a couple weeks before everything shut down with the pandemic. And so needless to say, right, there was a bit of delay in terms of getting started. But I believe we started just preliminarily at the end of 2020, and brought on our focus groups in summer, was doing summer and fall, doing the focus groups and interviews, and then the report development, fall through winter into spring. So that's a year and a half, I think.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, well, Isabella Garcia has a question. Go ahead, Isabella.
Hi, thanks. So I think that, youth have been definitely talking about climate anxiety and whatnot for a while, leading marches and delivering demands to public officials and whatnot. I'm curious, Julie, you mentioned talking about co-leadership, working together with OHA. I'm curious if you can kind of get into maybe more specifically, what can OHA do, or what is OHA's responsibility as a state health organization to really push the state forward on its climate goals that may alleviate the stress that's talked about in this report, and some of the health outcomes that are related to climate change? What is OHA's responsibility there, as climate change and health are so linked together?
Thank you for that question. OHA's role when it comes to climate change, we don't have the regulatory authority that other agencies do that directly kind of connect with greenhouse gas emissions and other climate-related issues. Ours is really to be assessing, highlighting, communicating so that people understand what the health cost is of not taking action. And, I think our role also has been, and I think this is another example of how that we, including in that sort of evaluation and assessment, is the voices and lived experiences of those who are most impacted. So, and in this case, right, we're really, I think our role is to listen, listen to youth. How are youth being impacted, and really kind of lift that up so that those who do have more authority and decision making can hear those voices.
Great, thank you very much. Our next question was added to the chat. It's from Ben Botkin with the Lund Report. He's asking, how did you find the teenagers who participated in this report?
Yes, so we worked closely with our partners to identify youth. We partnered, as I mentioned, with the University of Oregon Suicide Prevention Lab, and they have a big network working with different organizations and different youth that are especially focused around mental health. And then in addition, we reached out to organizations like Rogue Climate and Our Climate that have a lot of connections with youth who are engaged in climate activism, right? And oftentimes that climate activism is very much motivated by a lot of the effects, these effects that we're talking about on youth. So this was very much relying and working closely with partners.
Thank you so much, Julie. Our next question is from Cameron Baber. I hope I said that correctly, with KDRV in Southern Oregon. Go ahead, Cameron.
Thank you. And yes, you did say that right. Hi, so my question is for the students. So living in an area that's been affected by wildfire and extreme weather conditions, I'm sure you probably know people who've been displaced or majorly affected by this, which obviously can take a toll on your mental health. Are there any resources within your school that you've reached out to, or that you're available to reach out to? I know you guys mentioned that this would be a good idea to help you, but is there anything going on right now that can help?
At least at Ashland High School, I know that we have lots of mental health support, but there's also different clubs and stuff that talk about that kind of thing. So I know there's like a climate action club and different social justice clubs that are good spaces for youth to meet other people who have similar interests. And I feel like those places are usually the best for getting to share your experiences and kind of having peers that will support you through what you've been through related to climate change or any other social justice issues. But there are also adults at our school that are definitely available for you to talk about for that kind of stuff. And also after the fires in Ashland, that was when we were still on online school, but the community still pulled together really well, and there was a lot of different resources, and the high school had a big clothing drive, and there was people there that could talk. And so I know that there's a lot of support, especially around wildfire in Ashland.
Thank you.
Okay, and just a reminder for our media colleagues that if you do have a question, please use the raise your hand function. And also you will see that I've added to the chat some helpful links, not only the report, but some other links that'll help with your stories and offer much more information, more in-depth information. And as of right now, it seems we might not have any other reporter questions. That might have been the very last one. I know some of you have been messaging me asking for permission to record. Those of you who were not granted permission for whatever reason, please also note the YouTube link in the chat, which will then carry this entire news conference. So Julie, Meg, that might be the very last reporter question. I'll toss it back to you.
Yeah, just want to thank everyone for being here today. I don't have any additional remarks or comments. How about you, Meg?
No, thank you. We really appreciate you all hearing this story and carrying these messages, and we look forward to more to come.
And thank you to our youth guests. And again, any additional questions, you will find answers to that in the links for sure. So thank you all very, very much for your time.